My name is Lindabeth Binkley, and I am the oboist on the wonderful new recording from Earth and Sky, music of Jenni Brandon. And I'm here today with two fabulous women, Jenni Brandon, the composer, and LaToya Lain Washington, the soprano, who sang with me on Love Songs, which is a really wonderful piece for oboe and soprano. And we just thought today we would talk a little bit about the piece and ask Jenni some interesting questions from the performer's standpoint, and maybe share a little bit about our experience recording the piece and performing the piece. So first thing I want to do is ask LaToya, what drew you to this piece in the first place? I mean, I know that I was the one that was like, hey, you want to play this piece? But what made you say yes?
I think that the opportunity to collaborate with a colleague is the first thing that, drew me to say yes, and a friend. And then when I saw the pieces and I was able to read Jenni's writing about it, I was so intrigued about these poems and the experiences of Native American women, and to be able to tell their story. And then as we begin to delve into the piece, I saw that these were also the stories of all women. And so I knew that looking at the writing and looking at the melody, I was just attracted to it from every aspect.
Yeah, I mean, me too, Jenni. I mean, the thing that I think that drew me to it initially was, I mean, the oboe, we've talked about this before, about the oboe has a very vocal quality about it, and that you can bring out these colors and this tension in the line, and in a way that when I would read the text and then, hear LaToya sing it, it was just this really beautiful sort of way of coloring that poetry. So did you, I mean, obviously this piece was commissioned by an oboist, Aaron Day Sweeney, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did they originally approach you and say, I want something for oboe and soprano, or did you suggest that? How did that work?
It was a commission for oboe and soprano originally. I mean, that was the intent of it. And then I just started to dig into the idea of text for the piece, and, sort of had some freedom to kind of explore what I wanted to do. And knew that because I was writing this piece for two women, to write something that was celebrated women. And I began reading text, and I came across these poems or these settings, and just fell in love with this idea of telling the story of a Native American woman, but really from the perspective of, all of us as women, this shared experiences that we have, or experiences that we, have within our community as women. And so I thought, what a great place to tell a story, and especially with two such intimate instruments, obviously as the soprano, but then also, like you said, like as the oboe, who's, I really look at this as a duet between the two of them, because the oboe is such a vocal instrument and lends itself to pairing, I think, as a duet so well with the soprano voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was great fun with LaToya every single time. And I think the great thing about collaborating in this way, is particularly this combination, is, and I'll be real specific and musically geeky right now, and tell you that the way, LaToya, the way you use your vibrato and the colors that you get when you pronounce and finish words and all that stuff, for me was so inspiring, because I would be like, oh, how do I do that on the oboe? How do I make
And it was vice versa. When I would listen to you play your melismatic passages, and I'm like, okay, how do I make that legato sound in my singing? So yeah, it went both ways.
So much fun. So much fun. So let's talk about the challenges, because there may be people watching this that are like, I love this piece and I want to perform it. So from the singer's standpoint, what makes this piece challenging, do you think?
When I first started working on it, I was concerned about the size of my voice in this rep, in singing with the oboe, because I typically sing heavier operatic repertoire. With this song, it's so intimate, and I just wanted to do the text justice but I also wanted to be careful that I didn't come off of my body and I stayed on my sound and my voice. And so I can remember our very first rehearsal. I started singing and all I could hear was my sound. And I kept having to retune my ear so that I could hear Lindabeth. And I think this song kind of grew me up in the sense that I needed to be listening all the time and making sure that we were just not doing a duet or performing together, but we were actually telling a story, because we were like interweaving, literally, like one of the songs is called, going in and out with this story. And I wanted to make sure that my version or my contribution to the story was complementary to what the oboe was saying. And so, of course, there were places where I could just open it up and let it go. But there were those intimate times that were just so moving. And I can remember, I think our first rehearsal, I started crying during, I mean, I think it was the song The Backstep Weaving. It literally broke me down because it was just so delicate and personal. Yeah. And just the opportunity to train my ear in collaborating with the oboe. And the other thing is thinking about this text and making sure that, because the melody is so beautifully written, one thing that every singer wants is the right vowel on the right note. Yeah. That's magical for us. And so the opportunity to feel like this was, it lends itself to good singing. I didn't have to work as hard. Now I had to work in a different way, because if you remember, this was early on in my Fach change.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I was a mezzo forever. And so here is a piece where I'm going up to B flats and sustaining A flats and opening. These are so challenging because it gave me the opportunity to retrain my thinking and not think like a mezzo would approach this, but where should this ring as a soprano voice, and how high and buzzy should I feel this in my mask as I'm working on this repertoire in this new Fox. So this is one of the pieces I think that grew me up as a singer in the soprano repertoire.
Wow,
I love that.
Yeah, me too. I remember that. And I think for the oboe, we constantly worry about overpowering the voice. I was always like, can I hear her? Can I hear exactly what she's saying in the performance? I wasn't worried about it, obviously, in the recording, because we had to adjust that we could. But live performances, certainly, it's a delicate balancing act to not overwhelm the singer. And many times there were moments where I thought, oh yeah, this is kind of like playing one of the Bach obligato arias, where I know I need to shade my sound back and pull it out when I felt like you needed more support. And that, I thrive on that kind of stuff. So that was great joy for me. So now, Jenni, what's been your experience in terms of hearing other performances of this piece and things, is there anything that you want to share about that particular aspect?
Well, I love, LaToya, what you were saying about sort of that the shift, and not just vocally, but like mentally for yourself, for being, from mezzo and, with this gorgeous, voice that you have that's got this deep, rich colors to it. And I actually love, I love everything you did in this, but I love that you rethought how to do this, but then bringing in your background as a mezzo into this piece, because I'm a mezzo soprano as well. Like that's where my training is at and where I sing. And so it's interesting to hear you saying that, and the colors and everything that you brought into it, which I think are perfect. And I think that this recording will be a model for other people, because especially if someone's a mezzo who's looking at this and saying, well, I'm making a switch, or I want to try to sing some soprano repertoire. But yeah, I think, I just think the colors that you both brought together, like what both of you were saying about really working to interweave these lines together. I love that you as performers got that and really, took it and ran with it, because that was the idea of the piece. And that, that I hope that, I've heard other performances of this where people have done, have done beautiful, beautiful work with this as well. But interweaving these lines together in this way that it's storytelling, so that it's not just, the oboe is accompanying. Like that was never the intent. It was always the intent for them to dance together and to tell a
Yes.
story together. So I'm glad that that comes through in the score, and you all did it so beautifully in the recording as well.
And I will suggest to those that are maybe listening that are going to perform this piece. One of the things that was really helpful for me was to go through the score and analyze it so that I knew when I had to hand off a note, a pitch to LaToya, or she was going to arrive at a pitch, we were going to intersect. And I literally went through and like circled all those moments so that, because one of the things I think that is hard about this piece is we don't have the piano to ground us in terms of intonation or even in terms of just giving us an idea of where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
we can feel very naked.
Yes.
A lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember when we played it in the Outreach Center downtown. Do you remember that? And we had we were like, the audience was like right there in front of us,
like 3 feet in front of us.
And I was like, oh. But doing that sort of pitch analysis was really helpful, I think, and it did help our rehearsals go maybe a little bit more smoothly because we were aware of that. So
I tried to, you know, as a singer too, like I'm definitely very aware of that. And when you're offering a piece where there's not the piano with the harmonic structure underneath of it, but just a single line instrument, like I really tried to make sure that the singer could find pitches. You know, I mean, sometimes you're pulling it, I would say, out of the air, but I mean, like trying to find something that's relative to be able to find the pitch, because it can be really scary.
Yeah.
And actually on that note, just to jump in, Lindabeth, real quick, I just wanted to ask LaToya about, like, in general, like preparation, and maybe you speak to this piece, or just in general, when you're preparing like a new work, like new music work, how do you approach it? I mean, how do you sit down with the score, and like, do you have a particular way, like each time you're like, I'm going to do these things and look at it? I'm just curious about your preparation for pieces.
The very first thing I do is start with the text. It's always about the text. When I saw some of the text had authors, some were anonymous, some had authors, I was able to do a little bit of research to find not only that particular poem and that author, but everything else that they had written. And so I was also able to, I think it might have been like poetry.net, where I saw some interpretations of some of the poem. For example, I think it was, Song of the Blue Corn Dance. So that was important to know what the blue corn represents in that culture and community. Or when you were talking, when I sing about the kula kula, to know what the cedar tree represents as the life giver in that community. So I wanted to make sure that I went through, because what it means will affect the way I say it. And so going through the text, making sure that I knew what every word meant. How could I interpret a loon? What does that mean? Is this a regular boat? Is it a little boat? You know, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So once I spent the time with the text, then I go through and look at the music and try to see where myself and the other instruments are in duet, or where we're in contrast. And so I was able to go through and look at the oboe line and see where, if there were any places where we were in unison, or if there were places where she did my note first and I could find her, or vice versa, to see where the music was being made and exchanged in that way. And then speaking the text and rhythm is always the next step. And trying to sing it on do-do-do. Sometimes a piece like this is a little bit challenging in this regard, but if you try to sight sing it, just to give your brain an idea of the direction of the pitches, whether they're right or wrong, I usually like to do that. And then I'll go to the piano and check and see how close I was to it. The challenge with this piece is that working on it by yourself is one thing, but then when the oboe comes in and you hear that part in your head, you're like, wait a minute.
That's all right.
Let's go back. So I remember our very first rehearsal, I sat at the piano while Lindabeth was in the crook, so that I could pluck my notes along, because it completely changed what I had in my head based on my own my solo practicing. So yeah, you're starting with the text and then building from there is the main way I start.
I love it. I love to hear how people put together rehearsing something, especially something that's not familiar material and it's a brand new language. I mean, you know, that's the beauty of today with new music. Everybody's got, you know, really interesting, amazing languages that they, you know, bring into their music. But I love that. I love hearing how you break it down and put it all together. It's great.
It's the same thing for me, you know, understanding that understanding the text is important, and the meaning, and making sure that you're being respectful of that and honoring the telling of that story. So yeah, it's the same thing for me. I can't imagine going into our first rehearsal without having read your part. So I actually did play your part on the oboe, so that I kind of had an idea what you were going to be doing, and you know, looking at the words and looking at the inflection of the line as what you would have to say, and yeah, very cool, very
That's
cool.
great. I love hearing that. That's great.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for joining me. I hope this is helpful to other people that are interested in performing the work. Please give it a listen. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. So
Yes, it is.
thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna, oops, I shouldn't have done that.